The Lamborghini Temerario is here at long last. Outgoing is the V10 and incoming is a twin-turbo plug-in hybrid V8. Now while that sounded a little bit disappointing to begin with, the actual package that we're left with is quite interesting. And as someone who has owned two Lamborghinis, I thought I would give you my thoughts on it. My most recent Lamborghini being a Gallardo Superleggera, which I sold to pay for renovations and also to be able to set up a fund management company, which will hopefully be launching for public investment relatively soon. I'll include a link in the description so you can check that out if you're interested. But in any case, I'm going to be focusing here on the Lamborghini Temerario, a name that I'll probably continue to mispronounce forever, much like I mispronounced Gallardo or Huracan, I'm sure. Now by now you've probably seen a ton of videos on this, both in terms of the previews and the leaks, but also now that it's actually been announced. But in short, it is a hybrid twin-turbo V8. It produces some 907 horsepower. It goes from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour, or 62 miles per hour, in 2.7 seconds, which is pretty impressive, but of course many EVs are actually quite fast now, so people are probably going to be focusing on some other things as well. It has a redline of 10,000 RPM. It's mostly a lightweight vehicle, but it isn't necessarily quite as lightweight as, say, a fully carbon fiber vehicle, but it's made out of full aluminium. Now there's also a lightweight package, somewhat akin to the Superleggera package, but here you can just spec it from the outset. I don't know how many people are going to do that. I know that I probably personally would, but I don't know the price of it at the moment. Now max torque is 730 newton meters at 4,000 to 7,000 RPM. Now, that basically means it will probably be better in stop-start traffic than maybe had been the case with some of the predecessors, which is also going to be helped out by the 8-speed dual-clutch automatic, and also is going to be helped out by the rear-wheel or all-wheel steering that Lamborghini has been bringing into its cars, which is going to help a lot for those of us who aren't really taking these on the track and are probably more likely to be pottering about the central business district, going to and from various different things. Now the upgraded vehicle dynamics package, therefore, to my mind, is super useful and is a bit of a selling point from a practicality standpoint. There's also several drive modes, but probably if you're like me, you'll just stick it in Corsa and probably not actually drive it in full EV mode or whatever other mode actually exists. Now this package solves my biggest, I guess, gripe with the two Lamborghinis I owned, which is that they were a little bit of a pain to drive in CBD traffic, and also the turning circle was rather wide. Now I know the Huracan improved on some of these things from the Gallardo, but it was not necessarily completely solved. And therefore, I think this is an attractive package as far as usability goes. Now I'm sure it could be great on the track as well, but I also know that I will never drive any of these cars on the track, because the fear of and risk of damage and the cost associated with it is so high, it is just not worth taking the risk. Similarly, I have no desire to go through a full set of tires for the sake of taking the car on a track. I simply have better uses of money, such as investing that money rather than using it on tires. But different people get utility out of different things. Now the engine sounds rather nice, at least according to the engine sound on Lamborghini's website, which hopefully is somewhat representative. It won't necessarily compare to a V10, but it still sounds perfectly okay. And when you're in the vehicle, I suspect it will be fine for most people's purposes. Now probably the most interesting thing to me is the aesthetics of the car. Because with Lamborghini, that's one of the major aspects of the car, but also Lamborghini is often a symbolic brand. Symbolic in terms of either how the car presents itself or in terms of the vehicle and the company's backstory. In any case, focusing on the looks. While it definitely looks like a Lamborghini, you can see that in several areas. Firstly, the hexagons, which are everywhere. Secondly, the trapezoidal hood at the front of the car, which is a line that Lamborghini often uses. We have got this trapezoid at the front. And then thirdly, you've got the air vents around the side of the car, which again look very Lamborghini. There's also some throwbacks to other prior models, such as with the rear bumper design that's very Countach, The engine hood area, well, that's very Gallardo-like, with the buttresses going down either side, and I'll have a little bit more to say about that. In general as well, the vehicle has some rather straightforward, uncluttered, non-fussy lines, which I think looks really good. I.e., you compare this to some of the over-styled vehicles that Lamborghini has periodically put out, and I'm thinking here of the Huracan Technica, which I thought was a profoundly unattractive car. I think this is an improvement. It's not necessarily perfect, but significant improvement. So focusing on the front of the car, well, it has that trapezoidal design to it. I actually quite like the hexagonal fog lights, although I do know that those have been slightly polarizing. The bumper area also looks good, and I think it looks better than the Revuelto. The main lights, to me, are probably the area where I'm a little bit less enthused. I think they look a little bit too small to tie in with the overall design. I think they needed to be just a little bit bigger, or at least the lighting area needed to be. Not necessarily like in the Revuelto, which I don't think works, but I think the design is a little bit, I don't know, it looks a little bit strange given the overall design language of the car to me. The proportions look a little bit off. That said, if you start to anthropomorphize the car and start to think about, oh, what is this car as an animal? Does it look like what type of animal? Which is something that car designers seem to think about. Is it going to look aggressive or smiley or whatever? Well, to me, it looks like it's a bit of an aggressive cat. It reminds me a bit of like a puma or something like that. A menacing cat is the design language. Now, going around to the side of the car, I very much like the side of the car. I think that is a vast improvement over the Revuelto. It reminds me a lot of the Gallardo, which I think had a good side design. It isn't too cluttered, it isn't too fussy. The problem with the Revuelto was it had these side air vents, which had like lines going everywhere, which I thought looked odd. But this one is a lot more streamlined, and I think it looks a lot cleaner, and the styling is much more pared back and refined, while still looking interesting and like a Lamborghini. I think they nailed the side of the car. If you go around to the rear of the car, I have pluses and minuses to the rear of the car. I like the Countach throwback with the bumper going upwards and the exposed tires. I like the hexagonal design language with the rear tail lights, the exhaust, and I think that all works together. The area where I'm a little bit less convinced is the black cutout in the middle of the rear. In a dark colored car, you can't see it as much, but with that cutout, I don't know, I'm just not convinced with it at the moment. I think the lines are a little bit odd looking to me. It maybe would look a lot better if the black were carbon instead of plastic looking. Maybe it will look better in person to me. I wasn't as convinced about that, but I don't hate the rear of the vehicle. And I do quite like that they haven't gone too weird with too many lines everywhere. I prefer it to be a little bit pared back, and I think they've done a good job there. My favorite part of the car is the overhead look, and in particular the engine bay, where you've got the two buttresses going down either side. You've got the window toward the back of the car that goes out onto a flat surface, which has the engine. It is very much like the Gallardo, which I really liked. It's also somewhat like the Huracan Technica, which I was less convinced about because the Huracan Technica had lines, to my mind, going everywhere, and it just looked weird. I didn't like the look of the Huracan Technica. It looked overstyled to me. This looks a lot cleaner, and therefore a lot better. That is bold design language. They just let the bold, clean lines speak for themselves, rather than having too many fussy things going everywhere. So my overall thoughts on the exterior of the car are generally very good. If you go through to the interior of the car, well, it's somewhat like the Revuelto. I think the interior is perfectly fine. I like the center console area better than I like the Huracan because it has more open space. I didn't like how the Huracan or the Aventador, or really many of these cars, seem to have this big slab going down the middle between the driver and the passenger. I prefer the open space that they have at the moment. Looking at the gauge cluster, it's not necessarily my favorite part. I prefer analog dials, but also everything has moved on from analog dials and we've got screens everywhere. So I don't think we'll ever go back to analog dials. So maybe my views on that don't really count. But I think it looks okay as far as screens go, I guess. There are lots of carbon options, which I think make the car look better. I don't know the cost of those. It depends on the cost as to whether they're actually worth doing. I think the design language overall is quite nice. I like the seats. I like the fact that they've got the carbon race seats that are not necessarily only available in Alcantara, which is a material I hate because it wears out and then looks awful, whereas the leather, I think, is better to maintain and easier to maintain. So overall interior, I don't have a huge amount to say other than it's nice enough. I don't dislike it. I think it's better than the Huracan interior, and it's definitely better than the Gallardo interior, which was, to be fair, not brilliant. So overall, therefore, what do I think? Well, I don't know what the car is going to cost. So therefore, I can't really give an opinion about whether it's going to be good or bad value, or even whether I'm going to be able to go out and buy one. I suspect it might be above what I'll be able to pay for a car, but you never know, maybe one of my startup investments will be acquired and I'll end up with a cash windfall. You never know. But in any case, those are my thoughts on it. I've waffled on for a while now. Hopefully my thoughts have been somewhat informative or at least somewhat diversionary for you. If you've got any thoughts about it, well, let me know that in the comments below. And otherwise, hopefully I see you next time as well. Bye.